What if Queen Elizabeth's final words to Prince Harry were so profound they left even Prince William in tears? In a revelation that has stunned royal insiders, Prince William has reportedly broken his silence about a deeply private conversation between the late Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Harry. This exchange occurred shortly after Meghan Markle's controversial request to wear a royal tiara, an incident that many believe marked the beginning of a significant divide within the royal family. What exactly did Her Majesty say that so deeply affected her grandsons? And how did that pivotal moment contribute to the growing rift that would eventually reshape the future of the monarchy? Today, we delve into this emotional turning point, uncovering the words that echoed through the palace halls and exploring why this encounter may have been more consequential than anyone realized. Meanwhile, headlines erupted with even more shocking news. King Charles officially denied Meghan Markle's push for royal titles for her children. Archie and Lilibet were declared ineligible for royal succession, a decision that sent shockwaves not just through the media, but deep into the heart of the royal family itself. Though tensions between King Charles and Meghan Markle had long been speculated, this declaration made things unmistakably clear. A formal document, signed and sealed by the monarch himself and vetted by legal and royal advisors, confirmed the decision. Insiders described weeks of preparation, quiet strategy sessions, and late-night meetings that led up to the announcement. The decree was brief but impactful. Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor would not be granted royal titles, nor would they be considered in the line of succession. The justification cited? A breach of royal integrity. That phrase sparked intense speculation. Was it a response to Meghan's public criticisms of the monarchy, or something more strategic aimed at protecting the institution's reputation? The public reaction was swift and polarizing. Social media exploded with hashtags like #JarDollar Royal Betrayal and #Justice for Archie and Lilibet trending globally. Supporters of Harry and Meghan condemned the move as punitive and emotionally cruel. On the other hand, many royal traditionalists praised it as a necessary action to uphold the dignity and boundaries of the monarchy. Behind the palace walls, a different kind of drama unfolded. Royal advisors scrambled to manage the fallout. Official statements were carefully crafted, and damage control meetings were held behind closed doors. King Charles, however, remained silent, allowing the decree to stand as his sole statement. For him, this was not just a policy decision. It was a clear message to Harry and Meghan, and perhaps to the world. The monarchy stands above personal grievances and will not be swayed by sentiment or external influence. Meghan's reaction was, reportedly, one of deep shock and disappointment. Sources close to her said she had hoped King Charles's reign would bring recognition to her children's royal lineage. She believed their titles were a rightful acknowledgement of their heritage. But those hopes were dashed with a single decision. Prince Harry, too, was said to be devastated. Though he had stepped away from royal duties, he still valued the symbolic link between his children and the royal family. For him, titles were more than ceremonial. They represented belonging, history, and legacy. Heated discussions reportedly followed, with Harry seeking answers from the palace, only to receive vague responses or silence. As Meghan and Harry reeled from the news in California, speculation swirled in Britain. Was this a calculated effort to distance the monarchy from ongoing controversies? Or was it a strategic move to reinforce the purity of the royal line of succession? Experts debated the historical weight of such a decree, rare and typically reserved for moments of great consequence. Regardless of motive, the decision signaled a defining moment. Not only did it reshape public perceptions of the monarchy, but it also drew a definitive line between tradition and modernity, loyalty and independence, duty, and personal truth. To find a comparable moment in royal history, one must look nearly a century back. In 1936, King Edward VIII abdicated the throne for the love of Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee, a decision that rocked the monarchy, ushered his brother unexpectedly to the crown, and forever altered royal expectations. Though set in a vastly different context, King Charles's recent decree carried a similarly lasting impact. This wasn't a mere reprimand, it was a clear severance of royal ties. In declaring that Meghan's children would no longer inherit their father's legacy, Charles had drawn a definitive line. The response from within royal circles was swift. Insiders quickly began leaking details. According to palace sources, the decision came after extensive deliberation. King Charles reportedly consulted not only his closest advisors, but also legal experts in royal law and succession. It was not a decision made lightly, they claimed, but one guided by a vision of the monarchy's future. The phrase breach of royal integrity was no accident. It was deliberate, loaded with meaning, and non-negotiable. Speculation erupted. Some pointed to Meghan's ongoing criticisms of the royal institution, her candid revelations about racism and neglect, and the bombshell Oprah interview that had sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. Others believed it was more personal, that Charles had grown exhausted by the constant public drama, the accusations cloaked in media appearances, and the simmering tensions that never fully faded. Whatever the true reason, it was clear. This decree wasn't just a political move, it was deeply personal. Supporters of Meghan and Harry rallied in protest, demanding justice for Archie and Lilibet. Demonstrators marched with placards, and petitions circulated calling on Charles to reconsider. Online, the outcry spread rapidly, with hashtags of support flooding social media, yet Buckingham Palace remained unmoved. In a short statement, they acknowledged the public's concern but reaffirmed that the decision was final. For the royal family, it was a pivotal moment. An assertion of authority, and a reminder that even an institution rooted in centuries of tradition could still evolve. For Meghan and Harry, the blow landed hard. It wasn't just about titles, it was a stark rejection, a clear message that royal blood didn't shield one from consequences. As the days passed, it became evident that this was no ordinary royal rift. It was a battle over legacy, identity, and belonging. Faced with the fallout, Meghan and Harry had a choice: quietly accept the decision or challenge the institution that once welcomed them. And if whispers from Montecito were to be believed, the battle was just beginning. The first signs of unrest began as dawn broke over Buckingham Palace. Inside, a quiet storm brewed. Staff moved with urgency, documents were passed behind closed doors, and senior aides strategized in hushed tones. The decree had been signed, sealed, and dispatched with cold efficiency. There would be no leaks, no speculation. It was done. Outside, tourists snapped photos, blissfully unaware of the historic decision that had just reshaped the royal future. But those in the know felt the shift. Journalists began to swarm. Royal correspondents made frantic calls trying to verify the details. In no time, whispers became headlines, and headlines ignited a media firestorm. Thousands of miles away in Montecito, Meghan Markle was just waking up. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Her assistant, visibly shaken, handed it to her. "You need to see this," she said, tension in her voice. Meghan squinted at the screen, eyes still heavy with sleep. The headline was a gut punch. King Charles rejects Meghan's demands, Archie and Lilibet excluded from succession. She scrolled through the article, her disbelief growing. It laid out the entire story: the sealed decree, the official palace statement, and the cited breach of royal integrity. Her grip tightened on the phone, her hands trembling. She had fought to ensure her children would have a place within the royal lineage. She had believed that their bloodline would be enough. Now it had all vanished, erased with a single signature. Harry walked in, coffee in hand, his hair tousled from sleep. "What's going on?" he asked, noticing the look on her face. Meghan handed him the phone silently. His expression shifted. Quickly, from confusion to disbelief to seething anger. "He can't do this," Harry whispered. "He can't just strip them of their legacy. They're his grandchildren, their family." Meghan's voice was calm, though her heart pounded. "Apparently, that doesn't matter," she replied. "We're on our own now." Harry set the phone down with a sharp clatter, his jaw tightened. "We're not finished. This isn't over." Back in London, the story dominated every major news outlet. Commentators debated the motivations behind the king's decision, while palace officials remained silent beyond their carefully worded statement. But one thing was clear: the monarchy had drawn a line, and Meghan and Harry were left standing on the other side. Insiders shared fragments of information to sway journalists in their favor. Some suggested that the decision had been developing for months, driven by frustration over Meghan's public appearances and her outspoken criticism of the royal family. Others saw it as a strategic move, a message from King Charles that he would not be influenced by external pressure, even from his own son. However, the official statement released by Buckingham Palace was straightforward and uncompromising. It declared that, in accordance with the King's wishes, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor would not receive the titles of Prince and Princess, nor would they be included in the line of succession. The decision, it stated, was made to preserve the royal family's integrity and ensure the stability of the monarchy. The term integrity of the royal family sparked intense debate. Royal historians took to television panels, analyzing its significance. Was it a subtle reference to the controversies surrounding Meghan and Harry since their departure from royal duties? Or was it something deeper? Some speculated it was a veiled critique of Meghan's perceived breaches of protocol. The Oprah interview, the claims of mistreatment, the lawsuits against British tabloids, all of which they argued had tarnished the royal family's image. King Charles, they believed, had finally chosen to take a stand. However, not everyone agreed. Critics of the monarchy saw the decree as petty and vindictive, an intentional strike against Meghan and Harry for choosing to break away from tradition. Social media platforms erupted with hashtags like #Stand with Meghan and Justice for Archie and Lilibet. Public figures voiced their opposition, calling the decision cruel and archaic, a blatant attempt to erase the couple from royal history. One commentator on a popular news show remarked, "King Charles is sending a clear message: defy the monarchy and you lose your place." Meanwhile, within Buckingham Palace, tensions ran high. Senior members of the royal household held private meetings, preparing for the fallout. For King Charles, the decision was based on principle. Insiders revealed that he had grown weary of the public disputes, the constant criticism, and what he saw as a betrayal of royal values. His decree was a statement, a line drawn in the sand, signaling that the monarchy would not be swayed by those who stepped outside its boundaries. However, even within the palace, there were murmurs of dissent. Some senior aides worried that the move could alienate the younger generation, who already viewed the monarchy with skepticism. "It's a risky gamble," one source confided to a reporter. "King Charles is asserting his authority, but at what cost? Public opinion is more important than ever." For Meghan and Harry, the decree marked a significant turning point, potentially severing their final connections to the royal family. The line of succession was more than just a tradition. It symbolized legacy, belonging, and history. To be removed from it was to be erased from the very fabric of royal heritage. For their children, Archie and Lilibet, the impact was immediate. Without royal titles, their connection to the monarchy became fragile, nearly non-existent. The world watched closely, wondering how Meghan and Harry would respond. Would they fight back, or would they concede? And how would King Charles react? Would he stand firm, or would public pressure lead him to reconsider? Buckingham Palace's silence suggested that King Charles was resolute. The decree had been finalized, and the royal seal pressed into wax. For him, it wasn't just about protocol, it was a declaration of power, proving that despite ongoing controversies, the monarchy would endure. As for Meghan and Harry, the future seemed uncertain. The royal doors had likely closed, perhaps for good, and the struggle for their children's legacy had just begun. The aftermath of King Charles's decision reverberated far beyond the UK, sending shockwaves around the world. Media outlets scrambled to analyze every aspect of the statement, discussing its potential consequences for Meghan, Harry, and their children. Headlines dominated newspapers, and news channels featured constant coverage with royal experts and commentators weighing in on the significance of the king's move. The world held its breath, awaiting a response from Montecito. For Meghan and Harry, the announcement hit like a sudden, sharp blow. It wasn't merely a denial of their children's royal titles. It was a public declaration that they were no longer part of the royal fold. The ties that once connected them to the monarchy had been severed. In their sprawling California estate, the atmosphere was somber. Meghan sat quietly by the window, a cup of tea forgotten in her hands, her gaze distant. Harry, his fists clenched and jaw tight with unspoken anger, paced the room. His phone buzzed frequently with messages, requests for comments, whispers from palace insiders, but he ignored them all. "He has no right," Harry said, his voice raw with disbelief and fury. "No bloody right to do this. They're his grandchildren. Meghan, his flesh and blood." Meghan remained calm, though her expression was tense. "I knew he wouldn't make it easy," she murmured softly. "But I didn't expect this." Harry stopped pacing and turned toward her. "He's trying to erase us," he whispered hoarsely. "He's cutting us out of history. First the titles, now the line of succession." "What happens now? Do we just fade into nothing?" Meghan set her cup down and folded her hands in her lap. "He's making a statement," she responded. "He's telling the world we don't matter, that our children don't matter. But he's wrong." Her eyes sparked with resolve, her jaw tightening. "We won't just disappear." Harry looked at her, searching her expression. "What do we do now?" he asked, the weight of the situation settling between them. Meghan inhaled deeply, clasping her hands together. "We fight," she said firmly. "We tell our story, all of it. No more holding back. If he wants to rewrite history, we'll write our own." The decision was made. Calls were made, meetings were arranged, and within days, Meghan and Harry began preparing their next steps. A series of interviews were scheduled, carefully selected to make the most impact. But this time, it wouldn't just be a soft retelling of their struggles. It would be their truth, unfiltered. The palace had drawn its line in the sand, and now Meghan and Harry were preparing to cross it. Back in London, the royal family stayed silent publicly, but the halls of Buckingham Palace buzzed with anticipation. Senior aides were working quickly, briefing staff and preparing for the inevitable backlash. Behind closed doors, strategy meetings went long into the night, with contingency plans being discussed, revised, and perfected. King Charles remained firm in his decision, knowing the risk and the backlash that would follow. However, he believed it was crucial for the monarchy's future, to preserve tradition and to protect the royal line. Sacrifices had to be made. But, even within the palace, there were murmurs of dissent. Some questioned the timing and severity of the decision. "This is unprecedented," one advisor remarked in a private meeting. "To bar his own grandchildren from the line of succession isn't just bold, it's dangerous." But King Charles was resolute. His decision was made, and the family would have to live with the consequences. Outside the palace, public reactions were divided. Loyalists praised King Charles for his firm stance, applauding him for upholding the monarchy's values and refusing to bend to outside pressure. "This is true leadership," wrote a columnist for The Times, calling it a king willing to make hard choices for the crown. But others weren't as forgiving. Protests broke out in major cities across the UK, with signs reading "Justice for Archie and Lilibet" and "Down with the monarchy's tyranny." Social media exploded with debates, hashtags trending worldwide as people voiced their anger or support. Some saw the decision as necessary to uphold tradition, while others saw it as a vengeful act against two innocent children caught in a legacy they didn't choose. The political fallout was equally intense. Members of Parliament voiced differing opinions, some backing King Charles's authority over succession, while others questioned the royal family's influence over its members' lives. One outspoken MP suggested that the decree could spark a constitutional crisis, urging a re-evaluation of the monarchy's role in modern Britain. If a king can remove heirs from the line of succession with a signature, what does that say about birthright and inheritance? The MP questioned during a heated debate. But the king remained silent, his office issuing a brief statement that reinforced his decision, making clear that there would be no room for negotiation. For Meghan and Harry, time was of the essence. Their media blitz was set to begin in just weeks, with exclusive interviews lined up across major networks in both the US and the UK. But this time, they were not just talking to mainstream outlets. Meghan had reached out to independent platforms, digital media giants offering her an unfiltered space to speak her truth without edits or cuts. Inside Buckingham Palace, preparations were underway. Senior staff were tasked with closely monitoring all media appearances, preparing responses swiftly, and keeping the king updated on developments. Royal experts were briefed to craft counter-narratives, and sympathetic voices in the press were being readied to defend the monarchy's actions. The stage was set, with King Charles on one side, determined to protect the crown, and Meghan and Harry on the other, armed with their truth and ready to expose it to the world. The world was watching, the tension rising. Rumors swirled about more decrees, further distancing between the Sussexes and the royal family, but nothing was confirmed. For now, all that was certain was the growing anticipation surrounding Meghan and Harry's next move. The media speculated endlessly. Would it be another tell-all interview, perhaps with Oprah? Or would Meghan take the stage alone, unfiltered and unapologetic, to reveal the truth she had long kept hidden? Whatever form it would take, it was clear that something monumental was coming. Inside their Montecito estate, preparations were in full swing, with publicists, legal advisors, and close allies meeting privately to discuss their next steps. Meghan and Harry were deep in strategy, dissecting their key talking points and preparing for what was certain to be a media whirlwind. Meghan sat confidently at the head of the table, her calm demeanor belying the weight of the moment. Beside her, Harry's hand gently rested on hers, a quiet symbol of support. The tension in the room was palpable, and the stakes were higher than ever. Meghan cleared her throat, capturing the room's attention. "We can't just react," she began, her voice steady and composed. "We need to correct the record. It's not just about us," she continued. "It's about Archie and Lilibet. This isn't merely about titles, it's about legacy and truth." Her gaze swept across the room, locking eyes with each individual. "We're not here just to defend ourselves," she added. "We're here to change the story." Harry nodded, firmly. "They've controlled the narrative for far too long," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "This time it's our turn, our words, our truth." The plan quickly took shape, a bold, multifaceted approach blending traditional interviews with modern techniques. Live streams, social media posts, and a tell-all documentary would be strategically released across major streaming platforms. It was a plan unlike anything the royal family had ever encountered, raw, unfiltered, and relentless. Days later, the first hint of the plan appeared, a straightforward post on their official social media account. "Our story, our voice, coming soon." It was accompanied by a sleek, graphic, stark black text on a white background, bold and unapologetic. The internet erupted. Hashtags trended globally, and media outlets scrambled for exclusive coverage, while royal commentators speculated wildly. Facts. In Buckingham Palace, the response was swift and methodical. Senior advisors convened in the Queen's drawing room, their expressions grim. King Charles entered last, his face as determined as it had been on the day he signed the decree. He seated himself at the head of the table, nodding to his closest advisor to begin. "We have a situation," the advisor said, sliding a stack of documents across the table. "Meghan and Harry are preparing for a public release. We're looking at a multi-tiered media campaign. Interviews, streaming specials, possibly even a book deal. It's comprehensive." Charles picked up the top document, scanning it with practiced efficiency. His expression remained stoic. "What's their angle?" he asked, his voice steady. The advisor responded, "There's a strong narrative taking root online, one that frames our decision as unfair and punitive. They're already building public sympathy, particularly in the US. If they go live with their version, it could complicate things." Charles set the document down, his face unwavering. "Complicate, perhaps, but not undo," he said. "The decree stands. Whether they have titles or not, the line must be preserved. Integrity must come first." A low murmur of agreement passed through the room, though a few exchanged subtle, questioning glances. The monarchy's strength had always rested on public opinion, and if that wavered, their influence would be in jeopardy. "Could we present a counter-narrative?" one advisor suggested. "Maybe issue our own statements, even interviews, framing this as a decision made in the best interest of duty." Charles thought for a moment before shaking his head. "No, we won't stoop to their level. The monarchy does not engage in petty squabbles. We lead with dignity and restraint. Let them shout into the void. We rise above it. The room fell silent. The decision had been made, but the tension in the air was palpable. This was uncharted territory, and the stakes were unprecedented. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Meghan and Harry's preparations continued at full speed. Studio spaces were booked, production teams assembled, and scripts were meticulously crafted and refined. This would not be a haphazard tell-all. It would be a carefully orchestrated narrative designed to evoke empathy, expose perceived wrongs, and sway public opinion. In one of their planning meetings, Meghan stood before a whiteboard covered in timelines and key talking points. "This isn't just about titles," she began, her voice confident. "It's about how we've been treated, how we've been silenced. It's about Archie and Lilibet being punished for decisions they didn't make. We're not just telling our story. We're going to show the world what's really been done to us." Harry watched her with admiration, nodding in agreement. "This time," he added firmly, "we won't be silenced." The first segment of their campaign was scheduled to air within a month, a 1-hour interview with one of America's most respected journalists. Previews circulated in the days leading up to the release, showing Meghan and Harry sitting side by side, their expressions earnest and vulnerable. In one clip, Meghan could be heard saying, "They took everything from us, but what they can't take is our truth." The words spread like wildfire across social media, sparking debates, rallying supporters, and enraging critics. In the UK, reactions were more mixed. Some backed King Charles's decision as a matter of tradition, while others questioned the monarchy's reluctance to evolve with the times. Protests began to emerge outside Buckingham Palace, small but vocal, with signs reading, "Justice for Archie and Lilibet." Royal commentators debated endlessly. Some predicted that Meghan and Harry's campaign would force Charles to justify his decision, while others argued it would only deepen the divide, solidifying the Sussexes as outcasts while reinforcing the monarchy's grip on tradition. Back in Montecito, preparations continued with determination. Meghan and Harry were resolute. This wouldn't be like before. No more carefully controlled interviews with softened narratives. This time, they would hold nothing back. They would tell the story of betrayal, manipulation, and a monarchy that, in their view, had sacrificed family for the sake of self-preservation. At Buckingham Palace, King Charles braced for the storm. His resolve was unwavering. He had made his choice, and nothing, not even the voices of his own family, would change it. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the world awaited what would undoubtedly be the royal clash of the century. This was not just about titles. It was a battle for legacy, for history, and for the very soul of the monarchy. The day of the interview arrived, and anticipation was palpable. News outlets around the world prepared for what was being touted as the revelation of the year. Meghan and Harry were set to speak, and this time, there would be no royal constraints, no diplomatic filters, just raw, unfiltered truth. Inside their Montecito estate, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Cameras were in place, lighting was perfected, and producers made final adjustments to ensure everything was flawless. Meghan sat before the mirror, her reflection calm yet resolute. She wore a simple, elegant dress, her hair styled neatly and her eyes sharp with focus. This was her moment, a chance to reclaim the narrative that had been taken from her. Harry stood nearby, thoughtful but supportive. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with quiet admiration. She met his gaze in the mirror, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady. Harry nodded, stepping forward and placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "More than ready," he replied. "It's time." Moments later, they sat across from one of America's most respected journalists, known for her ability to ask tough questions and elicit genuine responses. The cameras began to roll. As the interview began, the lights dimmed slightly, setting a mood of intimacy and gravity. The journalist greeted Meghan warmly, starting with casual questions about her life in California, her children, and her life away from the palace. But the tone quickly shifted. Leaning forward, the journalist focused intently on Meghan, addressing, Recent news about King Charles's decision to strip Archie and Lilibet of their titles and remove them from the line of succession entirely. How did you both find out about this? She asked. Meghan's face tightened, her jaw setting in response. We learned about it the same way everyone else did, she said calmly. Through the news. Surprised, the journalist asked, You weren't informed in advance? No courtesy call? Meghan shook her head. Nothing. No warning, no explanation, just a headline. A heavy silence filled the room as Harry's hands clenched in his lap, his gaze fixed downward. The journalist pressed on, asking about their reaction to the news. Meghan inhaled deeply, her eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and resolve. I was heartbroken, she said, not just for myself, but for my children. To see them erased from their legacy without any conversation. It's not just hurtful. It's deliberate. The journalist, visibly moved by Meghan's emotion, asked, So, you believe this was intentional? Meghan didn't hesitate. I do, she affirmed. There have been tensions with the royal family, but I always believed Archie and Lilibet would be protected and respected as part of it. I was wrong. Harry then spoke, his voice low but steady. My father made his choice, he said. He chose the institution over his own grandchildren. The journalist, struck by his words, asked, Do you believe this was a choice between family and monarchy? Harry nodded, his eyes intense. Absolutely, and he chose the monarchy. Another pause filled the room as the weight of their words hung heavily. Meghan reached over, gently squeezing Harry's hand. The journalist cleared her throat, breaking the silence. Some say King Charles made this decision to protect the integrity of the crown, she suggested. That it wasn't personal, but necessary. How would you respond to that? Meghan's expression hardened as she repeated, necessary. Her voice was edged with disbelief. How is it necessary to strip children of their birthright? How is it necessary to remove them from the line of succession because of political differences? This isn't about integrity. It's about control. It's about punishment. The journalist leaned in, her pen ready. Do you believe this is personal? She asked. Meghan's eyes locked with hers and she responded firmly, I know it is. The interview continued, delving into their departure from royal duties, the ensuing strained relationships, and the media firestorm that had followed. Meghan spoke with clarity, recounting her feelings of isolation, of her children growing up far from a family that should have embraced them. Harry shared his own struggles, how the division had strained his bond with his brother, and the deep sorrow of feeling unwelcome in the institution that had shaped his entire life. Back in London, the response was swift and intense. News networks replayed the interview endlessly, analyzing every word, every pause. Some royal commentators criticized the Sussexes for betraying the monarchy, while others sympathized, recognizing the hurtful nature of the decree and its impact on Archie and Lilibet. Social media exploded with hashtags like Tramega Royal Rights and Justice for Archie and Lilibet trending in minutes. Supporters rallied behind the couple, while critics accused them of grandstanding and further dividing the royal family. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere was thick with tension. King Charles was briefed on the interview immediately, his advisors delivering the news with caution. He listened quietly, nodding occasionally, but his expression remained unmoved. One advisor spoke hesitantly, Your Majesty, there's growing public support for their narrative. The interview has painted them as victims of royal policy. If we don't respond, this narrative could take hold. King Charles raised his hand to silence the room. The crowd does not sway us with gossip and grievances, he said firmly. We are not moved by public outcry or media manipulation. The decision stands, in line with the monarchy's traditions. There was no room for debate. The room fell into reluctant silence. But outside the palace, the public's reaction was intensifying. Protests grew louder in cities like London, Manchester, and Edinburgh, with signs reading, Justice for Archie and Lilibet, and End Royal Hypocrisy. The movement had gained momentum, and the calls for transparency, justice, and recognition of Meghan and Harry's children were impossible to ignore. King Charles remained resolute in his decision, but the escalating public outcry made it clear that the battle was far from over. The lines had been drawn, with the monarchy standing firm, and the Sussexes determined to reclaim their children's birthright. The world watched, waiting to see how the next chapter of this royal drama would unfold. Inside the palace, senior aides worked quickly to manage the situation. Drafts of official statements were created and revised meticulously, each word weighed carefully before being presented to the king for approval. Advisors suggested strategic public appearances and perhaps a brief address to acknowledge the mounting discontent. However, King Charles remained steadfast in his decision. During a private meeting with his closest advisors, he explained that the monarchy should not respond to every public grievance. "We must stand firm," he declared. "The crown cannot bend with every shift in the wind." His advisors nodded, though some did so hesitantly. One advisor, speaking cautiously, raised concerns about public perception, particularly among younger generations. He suggested that acknowledging the issue publicly could demonstrate empathy. King Charles, however, rejected this idea. "Empathy is not the issue," he responded sharply. "This is about tradition and legacy. If we compromise now, where does it end?" The advisor, silenced by the king's resolute response, lowered his gaze. Though the discussion continued, an undeniable tension hung in the air. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry's media campaign was in full swing. After their interview, they made appearances on talk shows, participated in live Q&A sessions, and released carefully curated social media posts that emphasized themes of family, justice, and the importance of fighting for one's children. Their message was clear. This wasn't just about titles, but about identity, belonging, and challenging the long-standing control of the royal family. It wasn't just Meghan and Harry who spoke out. Their friends also began sharing their stories. A former aide who had worked with the Sussexes during their time at Kensington Palace gave a biting anonymous interview to a prominent news outlet. She revealed whispers about how things would change once Charles became king, and how Meghan's children would never be fully accepted. The interview sparked further controversy, and the press demanded a response from Buckingham Palace, which remained silent, only issuing a brief statement reaffirming the king's decision and commitment to protecting the monarchy's integrity. Despite this, public discontent continued to grow. Petitions circulated calling for King Charles to reconsider his decision and restore Archie and Lilibet to the line of succession. Online discussions, filled with conspiracy theories and debates, questioned whether the king's actions were truly motivated by tradition or personal animosity, as Meghan and Harry suggested. Inside the royal family, tensions rose as reports emerged of disagreements between King Charles and Prince William. Some sources claimed that William had proposed a more diplomatic approach to handling the situation, one that could facilitate private reconciliation without the public spectacle. However, King Charles refused to entertain such suggestions, asserting that the monarchy could not afford to appear weak. "We do not negotiate with scandal," he reportedly said during a private meeting. As the rift became more apparent, William and Kate's public appearances became increasingly tense. At a charity event, their smiles were tight, and their responses to reporters' questions about the king's decision were evasive. Behind closed doors, William, though loyal to his father, struggled with the growing divide. He believed the future of the monarchy required unity, not division, but his father was resolute in his stance. For Meghan and Harry, the battle was far from over. With their documentary series about to be released, they prepared to further expose their journey, promising to reveal the inner workings of the royal family. The trailer, featuring intimate family moments and emotional voiceovers, ignited shockwaves on social media, fueling anticipation for the release. Inside Buckingham Palace, tensions were palpable. Meetings grew longer, security was heightened, and every decision became more intricate. For King Charles, the coming months would define his reign, setting the tone for the monarchy's future. He had made his decision, but Meghan and Harry weren't backing down. It was a standoff between tradition and change, power and rebellion, with the world watching closely. As the release of Meghan and Harry's documentary approached, the atmosphere grew tense. Teasers and cryptic posts hinted at revelations to come, and brief clips of intimate family moments further heightened the anticipation. The morning of the release was filled with live commentary, reaction panels, and intense media coverage. Inside Buckingham Palace, preparations for the fallout were in full swing. King Charles remained resolute, unwilling to budge on his decision. Meanwhile, in Montecito, Meghan and Harry gathered with a small group of friends and advisors in their living room, preparing to watch the documentary's release on a large screen, shielded from the world's gaze. As the clock struck the hour, the documentary began. Meghan sat upright on the couch, her hands neatly folded in her lap. Harry sat next to her, his hand resting on hers, offering silent support. The documentary opened with scenes from Meghan and Harry's wedding. Bright, beautiful, and almost like a fairy tale. Laughter, smiles, and the radiance of newfound love shone on the screen. But the mood soon shifted, taking a darker turn. News headlines flashed. Meghan breaks royal protocol. Duchess of Sussex under fire. Family feud at Buckingham Palace. Meghan's voice cut through the montage, calm yet tinged with pain. "I believed in the dream," she began. "I thought this was my family, that I would be part of something larger, something grand. But I was wrong." The screen shifted to an interview scene. Soft lighting, neutral tones. Meghan sat alone, hands clasped, staring intently into the camera. "I was welcomed," she said, "but only on the surface. Behind closed doors, it was different. The rules were different. I was different." The interviewer leaned in, looking both concerned and probing. "What do you mean by that?" Meghan took a moment to gather herself, eyes steely with determination. "I mean, I was expected to conform, to be silent, to fit into a mold I could never truly fit into. And when I didn't, when I tried to find my own way, that's when the walls went up. That's when the decisions were made." The screen cut to scenes of Archie and Lilibet playing in the garden, sunlight filtering through the trees as they giggled and chased butterflies. Meghan's voice grew softer. "My children deserve more. They deserve to be seen, to be part of the legacy they were born into. But that choice was taken from them, not by me, not by Harry, but by someone who should have loved them unconditionally." The camera zoomed in on Meghan's face, her expression resolute. That was his choice. King Charles made that decision. He took their right to belong. The screen went black for a moment, allowing the weight of her words to settle. When the screen returned, it was Harry's turn to speak. Sitting firmly before the camera, his voice unwavering, he began, "I grew up understanding what it meant to be part of the royal family, the duty, the responsibility, the honor. But I also grew up understanding the weight of it all, the sacrifices, the expectations. And I always believed, no matter what, family came first. That's what I was taught. That's what I believed." The interviewer leaned forward. "Do you still believe that?" Harry's jaw tightened slightly before he responded, "I believe in family, but I don't believe in sacrificing your children for the sake of an image. I don't believe in erasing them just because it's convenient. Archie and Lilibet are my children. They're royal by birth, and nothing, not a decree, not a signature, not a decision made behind closed doors, can take that away." The documentary continued, revealing the couple's journey out of royal life. Meghan spoke about isolation, feeling silenced and misunderstood. Harry recalled tense meetings with his father, conversations that grew colder and more distant, until all that remained were formalities. The most emotional moment came near the end when Meghan shared the day she learned of the decree. "I was holding Lilibet," she said quietly, her voice cracking ever so slightly. She was laughing, just a baby, so innocent. And I looked at her and realized she'd never know that part of her legacy. She'd be shut out, not because of who she is, but because of who I am. And that broke me." The screen faded to black again, and the closing words appeared in stark white. The story isn't over. The documentary sent shockwaves around the world. Social media erupted in support, outrage, and heated debate. Protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace, their chants louder and their signs bolder. Polls indicated growing sympathy for Meghan and Harry, with many questioning the monarchy's actions and their implications for the future of the crown. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere grew tense. Advisors scrambled to formulate responses, manage the narrative, and quell the growing public unrest. King Charles remained stoic, refusing to make any public statements. But those closest to him spoke of mounting frustration, a crack in his previously unshakable composure. A royal insider leaked to the press that private meetings were being held daily to strategize damage control. Plans for a public address were considered but quickly abandoned. King Charles did not want to appear as though he was responding to threats. But the murmurs of discontent grew louder with each passing day. The line had been drawn deeper. Meghan and Harry had spoken, and the world had listened. Now, the monarchy was faced with a choice: stay silent and watch public opinion shift further, or respond and risk exposing the inner workings of royal decision-making. The next move was crucial, and it was in King Charles's hands. The release of the documentary had done more than spark a global debate. It had ignited a firestorm threatening to engulf Buckingham Palace. Protesters continued to gather outside, their numbers swelling day by day. What had started as a small group of supporters holding signs had transformed into crowds chanting for justice for Archie and Lilibet. Signs demanding an end to royal hypocrisy filled the air as chants echoed off the palace walls. Inside, the tension was palpable. Meetings were held in quick succession. Senior advisors rushed through the palace halls, grim-faced and clutching urgent folders. The palace's inner circle had never been busier, focused entirely on damage control, press briefings, and strategic planning, all under the world's watchful eye. But King Charles had made his stance clear. Silence. He believed the monarchy should not be drawn into petty public squabbles. To respond would be to admit weakness, to stoop to the level of those causing disruption. Yet, not everyone agreed. Whispers of dissent spread through the palace, growing louder as time went on. As the rift became more apparent, William and Kate's public appearances became increasingly tense. At a charity event, their smiles were tight, and their responses to reporters' questions about the king's decision were evasive. Behind closed doors, William, though loyal to his father, struggled with the growing divide. He believed the future of the monarchy required unity, not division, but his father was resolute in his stance. For Meghan and Harry, the battle was far from over. With their documentary series about to be released, they prepared to further expose their journey, promising to reveal the inner workings of the royal family. The trailer, featuring intimate family moments and emotional voiceovers, ignited shockwaves on social media, fueling anticipation for the release. Inside Buckingham Palace, tensions were palpable. Meetings grew longer, security was heightened, and every decision became more intricate. For King Charles, the coming months would define his reign, setting the tone for the monarchy's future. He had made his decision, but Meghan and Harry weren't backing down. It was a standoff between tradition and change, power and rebellion, with the world watching closely. As the release of Meghan and Harry's documentary approached, the atmosphere grew tense. Teasers and cryptic posts hinted at revelations to come, and brief clips of intimate family moments further heightened the anticipation. The morning of the release was filled with live commentary, reaction panels, and intense media coverage. Inside Buckingham Palace, preparations for the fallout were in full swing. King Charles remained resolute, unwilling to budge on his decision. Meanwhile, in Montecito, Meghan and Harry gathered with a small group of friends and advisors in their living room, preparing to watch the documentary's release on a large screen, shielded from the world's gaze. As the clock struck the hour, the documentary began. Meghan sat upright on the couch, her hands neatly folded in her lap. Harry sat next to her, his hand resting on hers, offering silent support. The documentary opened with scenes from Meghan and Harry's wedding, bright, beautiful, and almost like a fairy tale. Laughter, smiles, and the radiance of newfound love shone on the screen. But the mood soon shifted, taking a darker turn. News headlines flashed. Meghan breaks royal protocol. Duchess of Sussex under fire. Family feud at Buckingham Palace. Meghan's voice cut through the montage, calm yet tinged with pain. I believed in the dream, she began. I thought, this was my family, that I would be part of something larger, something grand. But I was wrong. The screen shifted to an interview scene. Soft lighting, neutral tones. Meghan sat alone, hands clasped, staring intently into the camera. I was welcomed, she said, but only on the surface. Behind closed doors, it was different. The rules were different. I was different. The interviewer leaned in, looking both concerned and probing. What do you mean by that? Meghan took a moment to gather herself, eyes steely with determination. I mean, I was expected to conform, to be silent, to fit into a mold I could never truly fit into. And when I didn't, when I tried to find my own way, that's when the walls went up. That's when the decisions were made. The screen cut to scenes of Archie and Lilibet playing in the garden, sunlight filtering through the trees as they giggled and chased butterflies. Meghan's voice grew softer. My children deserve more. They deserve to be seen, to be part of the legacy they were born into. But that choice was taken from them. Not by me, not by Harry, but by someone who should have loved them unconditionally. The camera zoomed in on Meghan's face, her expression resolute. That was his choice. King Charles made that decision. He took their right to belong. The screen went black for a moment, allowing the weight of her words to settle. When the screen returned, it was Harry's turn to speak. Sitting firmly before the camera, his voice unwavering, he began, I grew up understanding what it meant to be part of the royal family, the duty, the responsibility, the honor. But I also grew up understanding the weight of it all, the sacrifices, the expectations. And I always believed, no matter what, family came first. That's what I was taught. That's what I believed. The interviewer leaned forward. Do you still believe that? Harry's jaw tightened slightly before he responded. I believe in family, but I don't believe in sacrificing your children for the sake of an image. I don't believe in erasing them just because it's convenient. Archie and Lilibet are my children. They're royal by birth, and nothing, not a decree, not a signature, not a decision made behind closed doors, can take that away. The documentary continued, revealing the couple's journey out of royal life. Meghan spoke about isolation, feeling silenced and misunderstood. Harry recalled tense meetings with his father, conversations that grew colder and more distant until all that remained were formalities. The most emotional moment came near the end when Meghan shared the day she learned of the decree. I was holding Lilibet, she said quietly, her voice cracking ever so slightly. She was laughing, just a baby, so innocent. And I looked at her and realized she'd never know that part of her legacy. She'd be shut out, not because of who she is, but because of who I am, and that broke me. The screen faded to black again, and the closing words appeared in stark white. The story isn't over. The documentary sent shockwaves around the world. Social media erupted in support, outrage, and heated debate. Protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace, their chants louder and their signs bolder. Polls indicated growing sympathy for Meghan and Harry, with many questioning the monarchy's actions and their implications for the future of the crown. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere grew tense. Advisors scrambled to formulate responses, manage the narrative, and quell the growing public unrest. King Charles remained stoic, refusing to make any public statements, but those closest to him spoke of mounting frustration, a crack in his previously unshakable composure. A royal insider leaked to the press that private meetings were being held daily to strategize damage control. Plans for a public address were considered but quickly abandoned. King Charles did not want to appear as though he was responding to threats. But the murmurs of discontent grew louder with each passing day. The line had been drawn deeper. Meghan and Harry had spoken, and the world had listened. Now, the monarchy was faced with a choice. Stay silent and watch public opinion shift further, or respond and risk exposing the inner workings of royal decision-making. The next move was crucial, and it was in King Charles's hands. The release of the documentary had done more than spark a global debate. It had ignited a firestorm threatening to engulf Buckingham Palace. Protesters continued to gather outside, their numbers swelling day by day. What had started as a small group of supporters holding signs had transformed into crowds chanting for justice for Archie and Lilibet. Signs demanding an end to royal hypocrisy filled the air as chants echoed off the palace walls. Inside, the tension was palpable. Meetings were held in quick succession. Senior advisors rushed through the palace halls, grim-faced and clutching urgent folders. The palace's inner circle had never been busier, focused entirely on damage control, press briefings, and strategic planning, all under the world's watchful eye. But King Charles had made his stance clear: silence. He believed the monarchy should not be drawn into petty public squabbles. To respond would be to admit weakness, to stoop to the level of those causing disruption. Yet, not everyone agreed. Whispers of dissent spread through the palace, growing louder as time went on. Some senior aides privately expressed their concerns, confiding in each other that the king's silence was only fostering disdain rather than respect. "Times have changed," one aide murmured during a lunch in the palace courtyard. "The public expects transparency now. Silence looks like guilt, like complicity." The other aide nodded thoughtfully, glancing around cautiously before responding. "But you know how His Majesty sees it. To him, silence is strength. He won't yield." Meanwhile, in Montevideo, the reaction to the documentary was overwhelmingly positive. Meghan and Harry's social media platforms were flooded with messages of support and admiration. Celebrities and public figures came forward to back them, some even issuing statements condemning the monarchy's decision. A-list actors, political figures, and prominent activists took to Twitter, Instagram, and TV interviews, expressing their outrage. One tweet from a well-known American actress went viral, condemning the denial of a birthright due to one's mother. "Haven't we moved past this?" she wrote. The post received millions of likes and shares, sparking further debate. Social media campaigns spread quickly, with hashtags like "Sund Royal Injustice," "Give them their titles," and "Yanjarchi Matters" trending globally for days. Inside their Montecito home, Meghan and Harry watched as the public responded with growing validation. For the first time since stepping back from royal duties, they felt the tide of public opinion shifting in their favor. Meghan, typically composed, allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. "We did it," she whispered to Harry one evening as they sat on their veranda, gazing at the shimmering blue Pacific Ocean. "We really did it." Harry squeezed her hand, his face reflecting relief and pride. People are finally seeing it. They're finally understanding. While Meghan and Harry basked in their public support, Buckingham Palace faced a massive PR crisis, with mounting calls for an official statement. Political figures subtly urged clarification and transparency. Even members of Parliament hinted that the monarchy had a duty to address the growing public discontent. "The monarchy represents the people," one MP argued in a House of Commons debate. "If the people are demanding answers, it is the Crown's responsibility to provide them." Inside the palace, whispers grew louder. Some senior aides began to question whether King Charles's silence was sustainable. An internal memo circulated among his closest advisors, suggesting a more proactive approach, perhaps a soft public address, or a pre-recorded statement expressing empathy. However, the suggestion was swiftly rejected. King Charles remained firm, insisting that the monarchy's strength rested in its restraint. But restraint couldn't stop the momentum building against them. A week after the documentary aired, protests erupted in major UK cities, London, Manchester, Liverpool, where crowds gathered holding signs and chanting for royal accountability. Outside Buckingham Palace, the crowd swelled to its largest since Princess Diana's funeral. Floral tributes, letters, and handwritten notes were placed along the gates, some addressed directly to Archie and Lilibet. "You belong here," one note read, attached to a small stuffed bear. "No decree can change that." Internationally, the response was equally fervent. American networks aired nightly segments analyzing the fallout, while European broadcasters questioned the future of the British monarchy in an ever-changing world. The stark contrast between a tradition-bound institution and a new generation demanding equality and visibility was evident. Inside the palace, the pressure was mounting. Some senior royal family members voiced their concerns in private gatherings. Rumors circulated that Princess Anne had requested a private audience with the king to discuss the matter, urging him to consider the optics of remaining silent. "We cannot pretend this isn't happening," she reportedly told him. "The world is watching, and right now, they are not on our side." But King Charles remained resolute. "The monarchy has survived worse," he replied. "We do not bend. We do not apologize for tradition. If the world cannot see the value in that, so be it." Even as he spoke, cracks began to show. Polls indicated a sharp decline in public confidence in the monarchy, the steepest drop since the aftermath of Princess Diana's death. Royal commentators expressed concern, noting that younger generations were particularly disillusioned by the monarchy's rigid stance. "The world is changing," one commentator remarked during a live broadcast. "The question is, will the monarchy change with it, or will it be left behind?" Back in Montecito, Meghan and Harry observed as their story took on a life of its own. Invitations for interviews, speaking engagements, and political commentary poured in. Their story had become a symbol of a broader struggle, not just for titles, but for fairness, acknowledgement, and justice. But they weren't done yet. Meghan, always calculated, began working on a book, her memoir, not just about her royal experience, but about her journey from actress to duchess to global advocate. It would be her truth, told in her own words. Harry fully supported the idea. "We've started something," he said one evening as they sat beneath the oak trees on their estate. "We can't stop now." Meghan nodded, her gaze intense. "We won't," she affirmed. And so the lines were drawn even deeper. On one side stood King Charles, determined to preserve the monarchy's legacy in its traditional form. On the other, Meghan and Harry, emboldened by public support, prepared to tell their story to the world, unfiltered and unapologetic. The tension escalated as days turned into weeks, with still no word from Buckingham Palace. The silence grew deafening, casting a shadow over the UK and beyond. News anchors and political commentators debated the implications of King Charles's refusal to address the controversy. Some saw his silence as a symbol of regal strength and resolve, refusing to engage in public spectacle. Others viewed it as a sign of arrogance, a relic of the past, unwilling to adapt to the demands of a modern world. Even within the confines of Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere had begun to shift. Tensions rose during meetings. Advisors spoke with increasing urgency, and the pressure was undeniable. King Charles stood firm, unwavering in his resolve, despite growing concerns from those closest to him. But the whispers surrounding the palace had become more persistent. Rumors circulated that Queen Consort Camilla had voiced her doubts in private conversations with senior aides, questioning whether maintaining silence was truly the best course of action. "We cannot remain stagnant," she reportedly said during a quiet luncheon with a close confidant. "The world is evolving, and we cannot afford to fall behind." However, Charles remained steadfast, holding tightly to his belief in tradition. "The monarchy has weathered wars, political turmoil, and uprisings," he declared in a private meeting with his most trusted advisors. "We will endure this as well. To respond would be to concede, and the crown does not concede." Yet despite his words, cracks were starting to appear. Public support for the monarchy was slipping, subtly but unmistakably. Polls showed a growing generational divide, with younger people, particularly those under 40, questioning the monarchy's relevance in today's world. For many, Meghan and Harry's narrative had become a symbol of resistance, standing up to a tradition that seemed unwilling to adapt. Protests continued to swell outside Buckingham Palace, evolving from small gatherings into larger, more organized rallies, complete with speeches, banners, and live streams reaching millions. Activists linked Meghan and Harry's struggles to broader societal issues, calling for fairness and equality. One speaker addressed the crowd saying, "This isn't just about titles, it's about justice. If they can be erased from history, what hope is there for the rest of us?" Inside the palace, the tension was palpable. Senior aides moved with a sense of urgency, and discussions of a potential response to the growing unrest took place behind closed doors. But King Charles remained resolute. "We do not engage in spectacle," he said during a late-night meeting with his closest advisors. His voice was calm, but his determination was clear. The crown must rise above it all. Yet, not everyone shared this viewpoint. Whispers of dissent spread within the royal family. It was reported that Prince William had asked for a private audience with his father, urging him to take a more diplomatic approach. "We need to address this," William reportedly said. "The longer we stay silent, the more ground we lose. This is about the monarchy's future, not just Meghan and Harry." But Charles was unyielding. "We do not bend to pressure," he responded firmly. "Not from them, not from the public, not from anyone. The tension between father and son had reached a boiling point. William, though deeply committed to preserving the monarchy's legacy, understood the shifting landscape of public opinion. For him, silence was not a sign of strength, but a mistake, one that was already costing the family. Internationally, the criticism grew louder. American media dissected the royal silence, while European commentators questioned the monarchy's commitment to modern values. Even within the Commonwealth, historically strong supporters of the monarchy began to waver. In Canada, a petition was launched to reconsider the country's relationship with the Crown, citing outdated practices. In Australia, debates about republicanism were reignited, with calls for a referendum to sever ties with the monarchy. As the headlines continued to flood the media, monarchy in crisis, royal silence, strength or arrogance, the world watched closely. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry pressed forward. Invitations to speak at major events poured in, and they accepted many. Meghan spoke at the United Nations Global Equality Summit, her words broadcast to millions. "This isn't just about us," she said, receiving thunderous applause. "It's about standing up to systems that silence, that erase, that refuse to acknowledge the worth of individuals simply because they don't conform." Harry also found his voice, addressing a crowd of veterans and mental health advocates in Los Angeles. He spoke about family, legacy, and the right to be seen. "We can't change where we come from," he said with resolve, "but we can change where we're going, and I intend to do just that for my children." Their documentary continued to gain traction online, with new clips and previously unseen footage being released regularly. Support for Meghan and Harry grew, particularly among younger generations who resonated with their message of challenging tradition and advocating for one's voice. Inside Buckingham Palace, a sense of unease deepened. For the first time in decades, conversations began about the monarchy's vulnerability. Senior aides began to prepare contingency plans in case a public response was necessary, a rare step, one last taken after Princess Diana's death. Yet Charles remained steadfast. He insisted that the monarchy's strength lay in its mystique, in its ability to endure without becoming entangled in scandal. "We are not politicians," he reminded his advisors during a private meeting. "We do not campaign, we endure." Still, the pressure mounted. Public opinion continued to slip, protests escalated, and the world continued to scrutinize the royal family. Meghan and Harry's story had become more than just a family dispute. It was now a symbol of resistance, a call for justice, a beacon for those who felt excluded or ignored. The stage was set, with King Charles determined to uphold the monarchy's unyielding stance, and Meghan and Harry unwavering in their mission to secure a better future for their children. The battle lines had been drawn, and the world watched, waiting for the clash that would ultimately decide the monarchy's fate.